Looking back, it's clear the first crack appeared the day Frances joined gymnastics. At the time, it seemed like a natural step. She was always tumbling through the house, full of energy that needed direction. When Dahlia suggested enrolling her, I didn't hesitate. It felt like a good thing for all of us. I never imagined it would become the start of everything falling apart. That's when Floyd entered our lives, tall, confident, and easygoing. Floyd had a way of connecting with both kids and parents. The moment Frances started training under him, her excitement skyrocketed. She'd come home buzzing with stories of new routines and Floyd's encouraging words. I liked him at first. He seemed invested in helping Frances succeed, but things changed when Dahlia started spending more time at the gym. At first, it made sense supporting Frances, staying involved in her progress. But soon, her visits stretched longer. Helping Floyd with competition prep, she'd say with a smile, slipping out the door in the evenings. Her phone became a constant companion, buzzing with messages she'd glance at and dismiss before I could see that. I told myself it was nothing. Just a busy schedule. Just a dedicated mother. But doubt has a way of creeping in when the little things start adding up. The way her laughter sounded different when she talked about Floyd. The late nights that turned into early mornings. The faint scent of unfamiliar cologne clinging to her clothes. That I wanted to believe it was all in my head. That my imagination was turning shadows into something more. But the distance between us grew wider with each passing day, and deep down, I knew something had shifted. That I just didn't know how far it would go. Dahlia's late nights became routine. At first, she'd come home with stories about helping Floyd organize competitions or coordinating practice schedules. But as weeks passed, her explanations grew vaguer. Shorter. It just ran late, she'd say, slipping off her coat and avoiding my gaze. One Thursday evening, she left earlier than usual, mentioning something about helping Floyd rearrange equipment at the gym. Hours passed. By 10, I tried not to watch the clock, telling myself I was overthinking. By 11, my hands had started to clench against my knees without me realizing. At midnight, her car finally pulled into the driveway. I stood at the kitchen counter as she walked in, cheeks flushed from the cold or maybe something else. Long night, I said, keeping my voice casual. She set her purse down, smoothing her hair as if collecting her thoughts. Yeah, we had to fix the uneven bars. Floyd needed an extra hand, and she paused, then smiled. You know how it is. Her smile was quick, too quick. My pulse quickened, but I forced myself to nod. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling while her breath rose and fell in steady rhythm. Her phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. She stirred, reaching for it even in sleep. I glanced at the screen. Just a flash of text before she swiped it away. See you tomorrow. My chest tightened. The message could have been from anyone, a parent, a fellow volunteer, but something about the way she clutched the phone told me otherwise. The next day, doubt clung to me like a weight I couldn't shake. When I picked Frances up from practice, I found myself watching Floyd more closely. How he moved through the gym, how his gaze lingered just a second too long when Dahlia passed by. She laughed at something he said, brushing a stray hair from her cheek as she smiled. I clenched the steering wheel tighter on the drive home. That evening, as Dahlia prepared dinner, I leaned against the counter and studied her carefully. You've been spending a lot of time at the gym lately, I said. She didn't look up from slicing vegetables. It's for Frances. I thought you'd be happy I'm involved. I am. But it seems like you and Floyd have gotten pretty close. She paused, her knife stilling for half a beat before she resumed slicing. He's Frances's coach, Alfred. Of course we talk. Late at night? She glanced up, her smile faint and guarded. You're overthinking this. Maybe I was. But maybe I wasn't. Doubt has a way of seeping into your mind, twisting the ordinary into something darker. And once it takes root, it's hard to ignore, especially when the signs keep piling up. The tension between Dahlia and me grew heavier with each passing day. Her late nights continued, always with the same quick excuses. We had to prep for the competition, or, Floyd needed an extra hand. I told myself I was imagining things, that my suspicions were born from stress. But doubt clung to me like a shadow I couldn't shake. Then came the night that changed everything. Frances had just gone to bed, her laughter still echoing faintly from down the hall. I sat in the living room, flipping through channels without really seeing the screen. Dahlia stood near the kitchen, phone in hand, her fingers moving swiftly across the screen. The faint buzz of messages had become so common that I'd stopped noticing until now. She didn't see me watching as her smile flickered across her lips, soft, private. My chest tightened. Everything okay? I asked, keeping my voice light. She glanced up, too quickly. Yeah, just finalizing the schedule for next week's practice. Floyd wants to adjust a few sessions. His name again. Always his name. I forced a smile, but my pulse pounded in my ears as she returned to her phone. The air between us felt heavier than it should. I stood, moving toward the kitchen. She didn't notice until I was beside her. Mind if I see? I asked, nodding toward her phone. Dahlia's eyes flicked to mine, just a heartbeat of hesitation, but enough to make my chest tighten. Andrew, come on. It's nothing. Just scheduling. Then show me. Her fingers tightened around the phone. Why are you acting like this? Don't you trust me? I did, I replied evenly. But lately, I'm not so sure. Her smile vanished. You're being ridiculous. Maybe. But I still want to see. For a moment, she just stared at me, her breath shallow. Then, with a quick swipe, she locked the screen and set the phone down beside her. I don't have to prove anything to you, Alfred. I stepped closer, pulse quickening. So you'd rather lock your phone than show me what's on it? She folded her arms across her chest, her gaze steady but guarded. This isn't about trust. It's about control. I'm allowed to have private conversations, Alfred. Not everything is a secret. The air between us crackled with unspoken words. My heart pounded so hard it echoed in my ears. But before I could push further, her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it quickly, her breath hitching just slightly. One name. One message. Floyd, can't stop thinking about last night. The room seemed to tilt beneath my feet. For a moment, the world narrowed to that single line of text, simple, undeniable, and devastating. Who was that? My voice came out rough, strained. No one, she said too quickly, reaching for the phone. I stepped forward, grabbing her wrist before she could swipe the message away. Our eyes locked, and for the first time, I saw the fear behind her mask. Don't lie to me, Dahlia. Her breath came faster now, chest rising and falling as her pulse raced beneath my grip. It's not what you think, she whispered. Then tell me what it is. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. I let go of her wrist, stepping back as the truth settled like lead in my chest. My gaze shifted to the phone still buzzing softly against the counter. But I didn't need to read the rest. The first crack had become a fracture, and deep down, I knew there was no going back. The air between Dahlia and me felt thick enough to suffocate. The faint buzz of her phone still echoed in my mind as I stood there, pulse hammering so loudly that I could barely hear the ticking of the kitchen clock. She clutched her phone tightly against her chest as if shielding it from my gaze could erase what I'd already seen. Can't stop thinking about last night. The words burned through my mind, each syllable carving deeper into my chest. Say something, I demanded, stepping closer. It's not what you think, Dahlia repeated, her voice quick and sharp with forced calm. Then tell me what it is. She swallowed hard, her grip tightening around the phone until her knuckles turned white. Floyd and I, we got close because of Frances. We started talking more, that's all. Sometimes we joke around. Maybe I let it go too far, but it's not. Don't lie to me. My voice cracked through the air, sharper than I intended. Her breath hitched. I'm not lying. Then show me the messages, I said, my pulse pounding harder with every word. Prove to me that I'm wrong. Her eyes darted to the phone, then back to me. For a moment, her breath came faster, chest rising and falling as if trapped between the truth and the lie. Then, with a swift motion, she swiped across the screen too fast to read before locking the phone and shoving it into her pocket. My stomach dropped. "What did you just do?" "Nothing," she shot back, her voice rising. "You're overreacting, Alfred. This is insane. You're turning something innocent into innocent." The word tasted bitter. "Don't stand there and tell me it's innocent when I saw what he wrote. Last night, Dahlia." "What the hell happened last night?" Her breath hitched again, but her eyes hardened. "We talked after practice, that's all." "It was late, and where?" I cut her off. "At the gym?" "Yes. Where else would we? Was anyone else there?" The hesitation was brief, but I caught it. Some of the parents had already left, she admitted quickly. "But we didn't do anything, Alfred. It was just, stop lying to me." My voice echoed through the kitchen, and the silence that followed pressed against my chest like a weight. I took a step back, dragging a hand through my hair as I tried to steady my breath. The air felt too thick, too heavy. "You're twisting this into something it's not," Dahlia said, her voice softer now, calmer, as if she could reel me back in with a gentler tone. "Floyd is Frances's coach. I would never do anything to jeopardize." "Don't bring Frances into this," I snapped, the heat rising behind my eyes. "This isn't about her. This is about you and whatever the hell is going on between you and Floyd." Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. Her chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths as she stared at me, eyes wide and guarded. For a moment, neither of us moved, then she stepped forward, her voice lowering into something more measured, controlled. "Alfred, you're tired. We're both tired. Let's talk about this tomorrow, okay? When we've both had a chance to calm down." I held her gaze, searching for something, anything that could convince me she was telling the truth. But all I found was the distance that had grown between us, brick by brick, until I could no longer see the woman I thought I knew. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, my pulse echoing in my ears as I climbed the stairs 2 at a time. The bedroom door closed behind me with a soft click, but it might as well have been the slam of a final decision that I stood in the dark, breath shaking in my chest as I pressed my palms against the dresser, leaning forward as if the weight of what I'd just heard might crush me. "Can't stop thinking about last night." The words wouldn't leave me. No matter how hard I tried to forget, they echoed louder than anything Dahlia could say. Because deep down, I knew the truth, and soon, she would have no choice but to admit it. The silence that followed our argument lingered like a shadow over the next few days. Dahlia moved through the house with forced smiles and quick conversations, but the space between us felt wider than ever. Her phone rarely left her hand, and each time it buzzed, my chest tightened. I tried to push the doubts aside, but the image of Floyd's message, "Can't stop thinking about last night," burned in my mind. Every glance Dahlia exchanged with her phone felt like a secret, every late-night trip to the gym a reminder of what I still didn't know. One evening, as she grabbed her coat for yet another practice prep, I stepped in front of the door. "Stay home tonight," I said, pulse steady despite the tension curling beneath my skin. Dahlia's smile was quick but strained. "I can't. The competition's this weekend. Floyd needs my help with the lineup. Let him figure it out." Her eyes flicked toward her phone before meeting mine again. "Alfred, this is for Frances. Don't turn it into something it's not." I held her gaze, searching for a crack in the facade she wore so well. But before I could say more, she slipped past me, her footsteps quick against the hardwood floor. The door closed softly behind her, leaving me standing in the quiet house, pulse hammering in my chest. I knew the truth was slipping through my fingers, and soon, I wouldn't be able to ignore it any longer. The hours crawled by after Dahlia left. The faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of the clock were the only sounds breaking the heavy silence. I sat in the living room, my phone resting in my hand, debating whether to call her. Each minute that passed felt heavier than the last. By 10 o'clock, I couldn't sit still any longer. I grabbed my keys, the tension in my chest tightening as I stepped outside into the cool night air. The gym was only 15 minutes away, but every second of the drive stretched into an eternity. Pulling into the parking lot, I scanned the cars until I spotted Dahlia's sedan parked near the side entrance. My pulse quickened. Most of the lights inside the gym had been dimmed, but faint movement flickered through the large front window. Stepping out of the car, I approached the building slowly, each step heavier than the last. I paused near the side window, heart pounding as I peered through the glass. At first, all I saw was the empty gym floor, the uneven bars gleaming faintly beneath the overhead lights. Then, movement near the far wall caught my eye. Dahlia stood near the storage area, her back to me as she spoke to someone hidden from view. I leaned closer, breath fogging the glass as I shifted to see more, and then I saw him. Floyd stepped into view, standing too close, his hand grazing Dahlia's arm as he leaned in. Her laughter was faint but unmistakable. My chest clenched as I watched her smile, the same smile that used to belong to me. Before I could think, my fist hit the window with a dull thud. The sound echoed through the quiet night, and both their heads snapped toward the glass. Dahlia's eyes widened in shock, her hand flying to her chest as Floyd took a step back. That I didn't wait. My pulse roaring in my ears, I moved toward the entrance, the world narrowing to the sound of my footsteps on concrete. This time, I wasn't leaving without answers. The gym door swung open with a hollow echo as I stepped inside. My pulse hammered in my chest, each beat driving me forward as my eyes locked onto Dahlia and Floyd. They stood frozen near the equipment storage, caught in a moment that told me more than any words could. Alfred, Dahlia started, stepping forward quickly. Don't, I cut her off, my voice rough but steady. I glanced at Floyd, whose expression shifted from surprise to something unreadable. His hands fell to his sides as if unsure whether to step closer or back away. What the hell is going on here? My voice echoed in the empty gym, sharp against the faint hum of overhead lights. Nothing. Dahlia's answer came too quickly. We were just, don't lie to me, Dahlia. Not again. Her breath hitched, and she glanced toward Floyd before looking back at me. Alfred, please. I saw the message, I interrupted, my chest tightening with every word. Can't stop thinking about last night. So tell me what happened last night? Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Floyd shifted his weight, his eyes flicking toward Dahlia as if waiting for her to speak. But she didn't. Say it, I demanded, stepping closer until the air between us felt like a live wire. You've been sneaking around with him, haven't you? Alfred, listen, just tell me the truth. The words burst from my chest, raw with weeks of doubt and sleepless nights. I made a mistake, she stammered, her voice cracking as her hands trembled at her sides. That I swallowed hard against the knot rising in my throat. A mistake? My voice dropped, heavy with disbelief. How long? Alfred, how long? Her breath shuddered as she glanced at Floyd, then back at me. A few months, she whispered. The air seemed to leave the room all at once. My pulse pounded in my ears as the weight of her words settled in my chest, heavier than I'd imagined. And Frances? I managed, my voice strained. Does she know? No. Dahlia's answer came quick, desperate. She has no idea, I swear. I never wanted to hurt her, Alfred. Or you. But you did, I shot back, my fists clenching at my sides as my pulse thundered beneath my skin. Every time you looked me in the eye and lied, every night you chose him over coming home, you made that choice. Floyd stepped forward as if to say something, but the look I shot him stopped him cold. This doesn't concern you, I growled through clenched teeth. Stay out of it. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Turning back to Dahlia, I inhaled slowly, trying to steady the fire burning beneath my skin. I want you to pack your things and leave the house tonight. Her eyes widened. Alfred, please, we can talk about this. There's nothing left to talk about, I said, my voice low but firm. You made your choice. Now live with it. For a moment, she stood frozen, her breath hitching as tears filled her eyes. But I didn't wait to see them fall. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the gym, each step echoing through the silence that followed me. The cold night air hit my face as I stepped outside, but the heat in my chest didn't fade. My pulse pounded with the weight of everything I just heard, but beneath the anger, a strange sense of clarity settled in my chest. The confrontation was over, but the hardest part was yet to come. That I drove home in silence, the hum of the engine the only sound breaking through the storm of thoughts swirling in my mind. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, knuckles white against the leather. Dahlia's words echoed over and over, each repetition heavier than the last. A few months, the air inside the car felt suffocating. I rolled down the window, letting the cool night breeze hit my face, but it did little to ease the pressure building in my chest. My pulse still pounded in my ears, and the memory of Floyd's gaze, calm, unreadable, burned behind my eyes. When I pulled into the driveway, the house stood dark and silent, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside me. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel as my breath came slow and heavy. Every step toward the front door felt heavier than the last, each footfall echoing the weight of what I'd just learned. Inside, the air felt colder than usual. I stood in the hallway, staring at the family photos that lined the walls, moments frozen in time, untouched by the cracks that had formed beneath the surface. My gaze lingered on a picture of the three of us, Dahlia, Francis, and me, smiling beneath the summer sun. How had it come to this? I moved toward the living room, sinking onto the couch as exhaustion settled into my bones. My pulse had slowed, but the ache in my chest remained, a hollow space carved out by betrayal. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, head in my hands, as the events of the night replayed in vivid detail. Floyd's hand brushing Dahlia's arm. Her laughter, soft and private. The way she'd hesitated when I demanded the truth. A few months. The words clung to me like a weight I couldn't shake. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply as I tried to steady the whirlwind of emotions pulling me in every direction: anger, sadness, disbelief. Beneath it all, a hollow ache settled deep in my chest, heavier than I'd expected. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made me sit up straighter. My pulse quickened as I heard footsteps approach the front door, then the faint click of a key turning in the lock. The door opened slowly, and Dahlia stepped inside. Her gaze met mine, instantly wide, uncertain, searching for something in my expression that she wouldn't find. She closed the door behind her, the soft click echoing through the silence. Alfred. Her voice was barely above a whisper as she stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. Please, let's talk. I stood slowly, pulse steady despite the fire still smoldering beneath my skin. There's nothing left to say, Dahlia. Her breath hitched as she stepped closer. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But please don't let this be the end. I held her gaze, searching for something, anything that could undo the damage she'd done. But all I saw was the distance she'd created with every lie, every late night, every moment she'd chosen Floyd over the life we'd built together. You should start packing, I said quietly, my voice firm despite the ache beneath my ribs. I meant what I said. Tears welled in her eyes, but I stepped past her before she could speak. The air between us felt too thick, too heavy with words that could no longer change anything. Yes, I climbed the stairs to the bedroom, each step felt like a door closing behind me, one by one, until the past was locked away where it belonged. The confrontation was over. Now, all that remained was deciding how to move forward. Morning came heavy with the weight of what had been said. I stood in the bedroom doorway, watching as Dahlia folded clothes into a suitcase, her movements slow and deliberate. The faint sound of zippers and hangers clinking against the rod filled the silence between us. No more words, no more lies. Just the quiet process of dismantling a life we'd built together. Francis was still asleep down the hall, unaware of the storm that had unfolded beneath the roof she called home. The thought of her waking up to an empty space where her mother once stood clenched at my chest, but the ache was softened by the knowledge that she deserved better than the shadows of betrayal. Dahlia paused, her hands resting on the edge of the suitcase. Alfred, I said, my voice low but firm. There's nothing left to explain. She turned slowly, her eyes searching mine. I never wanted this to happen, she whispered. But it did, I replied. And we can't undo that. Her breath hitched, but no more words followed. She zipped the suitcase shut and stood, her posture straight despite the tears brimming in her eyes. Without another word, she lifted the suitcase and moved toward the door. I followed her down the stairs, each step echoing the finality of what we'd become. At the front door, she paused, glancing back as if waiting for something: an apology, forgiveness, or maybe just one last look at the life she was leaving behind, but I said nothing. With a slow breath, she opened the door. Cool morning air rushed in, carrying with it the faint sounds of birds and distant traffic. She stepped outside, the suitcase rolling softly against the pavement. The door closed with a quiet click, leaving me standing in the empty hallway. For the first time in weeks, the air around me felt lighter. Not free of pain or sadness, but lighter, as if the weight of doubt and deception had finally been lifted. I leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly as the silence settled into my bones. Upstairs, Frances stirred, her footsteps faint against the floorboards. The sound grounded me, reminding me that life still moved forward. I pushed away from the wall and headed to the kitchen, the faint hum of the coffee maker breaking the stillness. As I poured a cup, my reflection stared back at me from the dark window, tired but steady. The past was behind me now, the future was mine to rebuild. The hours after Dahlia left moved slowly, each minute stretching longer than the last. The house felt different, quieter, emptier, as if the air itself had shifted. I stood by the kitchen window, coffee cooling in my hand as I watched the morning sun creep over the trees. Despite everything, a strange calm settled over me. Frances' footsteps padded softly down the hallway. I turned as she entered the kitchen, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Her gaze flicked toward the front door, then back to me, curiosity flickering in her expression. "Where's Mom?" she asked. That I inhaled slowly, setting the coffee mug down. "She had to go away for a little while," I said carefully. "Why?" The question hung in the air, heavier than I expected. I crouched to her level, placing my hands gently on her shoulders. "Sometimes adults make mistakes," I said, searching her wide eyes for a way to explain what couldn't be fully understood. "But none of this is your fault. Your mom loves you, and so do I. That will never change." Frances studied my face for a moment before nodding slowly, as if sensing the weight of what I wasn't saying. "Is she coming back?" I hesitated, the words sticking in my throat. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice soft. Silence lingered between us until Frances wrapped her arms around my neck, holding on tightly. I closed my eyes, breathing in the warmth of her small embrace, the one constant that hadn't shattered beneath the weight of betrayal. When she pulled back, I offered a small smile and smoothed her hair. "How about pancakes for breakfast?" Frances' eyes brightened. "With chocolate chips?" "You got it." The routine of mixing batter and flipping pancakes grounded me in the present, the simplicity of each action pulling me away from the chaos of the past few days. By the time Frances sat at the table with syrup-sticky fingers and a grin on her face, the weight in my chest had eased, if only slightly. As I cleaned up the dishes, my phone buzzed from the counter. I wiped my hands on a towel before glancing at the screen. "Dahlia, can we talk?" I stared at the message, my pulse quickening. The part of me that still clung to the past wanted to respond, to ask why, to demand answers that would never change what had happened. But another part of me, the part that had felt the weight of her lies settle into my bones, knew that some conversations didn't need to happen. I placed the phone face down on the counter, turning back to Frances as she finished her breakfast. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be questions, difficult days, and moments when the past threatened to pull me back. But as I looked at my daughter's smile, something inside me settled. I'd lost a marriage, but I hadn't lost everything. The message from Dahlia sat on my phone screen like a weight I couldn't ignore. "Can we talk?" 5 simple words that stirred a storm of emotions I thought I'd left behind the moment she walked out the door. I stood at the counter, fingers hovering over the screen as my pulse quickened. Part of me wanted to reply, to demand answers, to hear her explain why she'd risked everything for moments with Floyd. But another part of me, the part that remembered the hollow ache of betrayal, knew that some questions had no satisfying answers. "Dad?" Frances' voice pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to see her standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Can we go to the park today?" I smiled, the decision settling in my chest as I slid the phone into my pocket. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's go." The afternoon air was crisp and clear as we walked through the park, Frances skipping ahead with the carefree joy only a child could have. I watched her climb the jungle gym, her laughter echoing through the air, and for the first time in weeks, the tension in my chest began to ease. Sitting on a nearby bench, I let the sunlight warm my face as I thought about the future. The choice I faced wasn't about Dahlia, it was about what came next. I could let the weight of betrayal define me, or I could move forward, one step at a time. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't check it. Not yet. For now, this moment watching my daughter laugh without the shadow of broken trust hanging over us was all that mattered, because sometimes, the best way to heal is to choose what comes next. Days passed without another message from Dahlia, but her words lingered in my mind. "Can we talk?" I told myself I'd made the right choice by ignoring it. Yet, every time my phone buzzed, a part of me braced for her name to appear again. On a crisp Saturday afternoon, Frances and I returned from the park, her laughter still echoing in my ears as we stepped inside. The warmth of the house wrapped around us, familiar and comforting. I helped her out of her coat, hanging it by the door as she darted toward the living room, her sneakers squeaking against the hardwood floor. "Dad, can we watch a movie tonight?" she called from the couch. "Of course," I replied, my smile genuine for the first time in weeks. But as I moved toward the kitchen, a knock at the front door stopped me in my tracks. My pulse quickened. I knew before I opened it. The moment I swung the door open, my breath caught in my chest. Dahlia stood on the porch, hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her eyes searched mine, full of unspoken words. "Alfred," she began, her voice soft but strained. "Please. I just need to talk to you. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I hesitated, the air between us heavy with everything unsaid. Part of me wanted to close the door, to protect the fragile sense of peace I'd begun to rebuild. But another part, curious, angry, or maybe just tired of carrying the questions alone, held me still. "Frances is home," I said, my voice low but firm. "Whatever you need to say, keep it quick." She nodded, stepping inside as I closed the door behind her. The air seemed to shift as she stood there, her gaze flicking briefly toward the living room where Frances' laughter filtered through the doorway. "I know I hurt you," Dahlia said, her voice trembling. "I know I messed up in ways I can never take back. But I didn't come here to make excuses." "Then why did you come?" I asked, crossing my arms as I held her gaze. "Because I need you to know the truth," she replied. "Not for my sake but for yours. I don't want you to spend the rest of your life wondering why." The air between us crackled with unspoken tension. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I forced myself to stand still, waiting. She took a shaky breath. "It started with the late nights at the gym. I told myself I was doing it for Frances, that helping Floyd was just part of being involved. But somewhere along the way, it became more. I didn't plan for it to happen. I didn't want it to happen. But it did." I clenched my fists at my sides, each word tightening the knot in my chest. "So why come back now?" I asked, my voice rougher than I intended. "Because I wanted to see you," she admitted. "To see if there's any part of you that could ever forgive me." Silence, thick, heavy. The air between us felt like a wall built from every lie, every night she'd chosen someone else. But as I stared into her eyes filled with guilt, regret, and something else I couldn't quite name, I realized the choice before me wasn't about her. It was about me. About what came next. I took a slow breath, steadying the pulse that pounded beneath my ribs. "Dahlia," I said quietly, "some things can't be undone. What you did, it broke something between us. And no matter how many times you explain it, the trust we had is gone." Her breath hitched, but I held her gaze, my voice steady as I continued. "I don't hate you. I don't want revenge or bitterness to define what's left of our lives. but I can't go back. Not after everything. Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded slowly, accepting the finality in my words. A faint sound of laughter drifted from the living room, grounding me in the present, the life I still had, the future waiting to be rebuilt. Goodbye, Dahlia, I said softly. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, she turned and stepped toward the door. The air seemed to shift as she opened it, the faint chill of the afternoon breeze brushing against my skin. For a moment, she paused at the threshold, glancing back with a look that carried more than words could say. Then she stepped outside, and the door closed softly behind her. I stood still, the echoes of the past fading with her footsteps as she walked away. My pulse slowed, steadied, as the silence settled into my chest, lighter, somehow, as if the weight I'd carried for so long had finally begun to lift. I in the living room, Frances called out, her laughter breaking through the stillness. Smiling faintly, I turned and stepped toward her, voice toward the future waiting on the other side of goodbye. The sound of the door clicking shut echoed through the house, final and unyielding. I stood still, breath shallow as the air seemed to settle into a new kind of silence. Dahlia was gone. For good this time. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly as the weight in my chest began to ease, not completely, but enough to breathe again. The past, with all its betrayal and heartbreak, had finally released its grip. Dad? Frances' voice pulled me from my thoughts. I turned toward the living room, her curious eyes peeking around the corner. Everything okay? She asked softly. I managed a smile, stepping forward and kneeling to meet her gaze. Yeah, sweetheart. Everything's going to be just fine. She studied my face for a moment, as if sensing the shift in the air, then wrapped her arms around my neck. I held her close, the warmth of her embrace grounding me in the present. As I pulled back, smoothing her hair with a gentle hand, I felt the weight of what came next, uncertain, yes, but no longer weighed down by the past. Now, I said with a small smile, how about that movie? Frances grinned, the light in her eyes a reminder of what mattered most. And as I followed her into the living room, the echoes of the past faded quietly behind me. Days passed quietly after Dahlia's departure. The house, once heavy with tension, now felt lighter. Frances adjusted quickly, her laughter filling the space with warmth. Each moment with her became a reminder of what mattered most, the future we were building together. One night, as I tucked her in, she asked softly, "Will Mom come back?" I squeezed her hand gently. "I don't know, sweetheart. But I'll always be here." She smiled, eyes full of trust. As I turned off the light, peace settled over me. The past was gone, the future was ours. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows, casting warm patterns across the floor. The house, once heavy with shadows of the past, now felt lighter, filled with the quiet promise of new beginnings. Frances sat at the table, her laughter ringing through the air as I poured us both a glass of orange juice. Her smile, so bright and full of life, reminded me of what mattered most. As I sat beside her, I felt the weight of the past finally lift from my shoulders. The pain of betrayal had left its mark, but it no longer defined me. What mattered was the present, the life I was rebuilding, step by step, ready for today. I asked, ruffling her hair with a grin. "Ready?" She beamed, and as we stepped outside into the crisp morning air, I knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. But with each step forward, the echoes of heartbreak faded a little more. This was our new beginning, and I wasn't looking back.